I'm late, it's 5:01. Welcome everyone. If you don't know, I'm Chris Hoffman, Mayor of Jacksonville Beach, and I appreciate you guys all taking the time out of your schedules to come and be here with us today to discuss the topic of our charter and the 35-foot height limitation in our city. Mostly appreciate you coming out because it means you're interested in learning more, which is always a good thing in our community, and we are interested in you learning more, and we're interested in hearing your feedback and thoughts on this particular issue and the proposal. I want to start off by recognizing my colleagues on the City Council who are here. Thank you guys all so much for being here. Their name tags are in front of them, so I'm not going to introduce them each. And then we've also invited members of the CRA, Planning Commission, and Board of Adjustment. Anybody, raise your hand if you represent one of those boards. Great, wonderful turnout. Thank you guys all so much for being here and participating in this program. So this is kind of an open house, and when we were thinking about the format of it, it didn't really work to have kind of posters around and kind of free-range. So it's going to be a little programmy, but it will go on. We'll keep repeating the presentation in the program as long as we need to, but I'm going to do a slideshow, and then we're going to go ahead and stop at the end of the slideshow and then have discussion, questions, comments, concerns, all of that. We do have, we are taking notes, we are listening, we are asking the questions because we want to know the answers. And we are also broadcasting this on YouTube. So, hi YouTubers. So when you do ask a question, we're not going to be passing the microphone around, but I'll repeat the question so that the people who are joining us remotely can hear. Okay, guys ready? Okay, so I also want to mention we have Jim and Taylor here from the 7 group, and they've been working with us. Jim's been working with us for, I won't mention how many years, but they have both been working with us with the CRA and with some of our downtown incentive and development projects. So we're glad to have them both here. So we're going to start off with a little bit of history. So just a brief history of the height limit in Jacksonville Beach. Prior to 2004, buildings could exceed 35 feet for specific uses in some zoning districts if certain criteria were met. In the central business district, the height limit for buildings was 50 feet, but could exceed that also if certain criteria were met. In 2004, in response to the construction of several, I think several is probably an understatement, high-rise buildings in Jacksonville Beach, Beaches Watch sponsored a charter amendment via referendum proposing the limit on the height of all buildings in Jacksonville Beach to 35 feet. The referendum passed with 76% of the vote. New language was added to the Land Development Code in support of the past building height limit amendment. There was a second amendment on that ballot that the City of Jacksonville Beach sponsored, which would have established a 35-foot height limit for all new buildings in the city, except within the central business district and areas east of 2nd Street, where heights in excess of 35 feet would be allowed in proportion to increased side yard setbacks. That referendum failed with only 36% of the vote. So you can do the math there. Some people voted yes for both of them. So I'm not sure how they did that. But you can also see that that was a much more complicated amendment to carve out the downtown and have a separate section like that. Does anybody here want more of this?
No.
Can we just show of hands? Raise your hand. Anybody? More of these? Raise your hand if you want more. Can we all agree that we don't want more of this? Everybody?
Yes.
We all agree. Okay. Good. So we're on the same page with that. These are all in Jacksonville Beach currently. So what brought us together to have this discussion? Drop the slide there. So as a council and as the city, we've been having community vision meetings. We've been working on our strategic plan, and we've been working with the community redevelopment agency. And what we're hearing across the board from our citizens, from our businesses, from those volunteers who are working hard for us on our different committees is we want a downtown that we want to go to, that we as the residents can go and enjoy, that isn't just for out-of-towners, people coming in for the nightlife, but it's somewhere where we don't just drive past it in order to get to Ponte Vedra or Beaches Town Center. So that's something that we've heard very consistently through all of the work that we've been doing and speaking with residents in the visioning meeting. We've also tasked the CRA, and the CRA is already tasked with a couple of priorities, which are encourage the recreation of a compact mixed-use area oriented to recreation, entertainment, specialty retail, tourism, and housing. Encourage the development of a mix of activities in the core area, including residential, retail, hotel, and office. Expand and enhance the usable open space in the community redevelopment area to support and encourage greater pedestrian activity. And we as the council have asked the CRA to really focus on that economic development. We've done a lot of work in the past few decades on the infrastructure of downtown, on the public works, on the drainage, on the parking, on the streetscapes. And now we really need to go kind of above the concrete and really work on the marketing and economic development of our downtown. So that's what brought us here today. This is the language that is currently in the charter. In order to further protect the public health, safety, general welfare, and aesthetics, no new building height shall exceed 35 feet, nor shall any existing building be altered to cause it to exceed a building height of 35 feet. So, in thinking about what we've been hearing in our community visioning, the future that we see for downtown Jacksonville Beach, and the opportunity to incentivize developers to build the types of buildings that we want to see in our downtown, we have come up with proposing an addition to the charter. So this would stay in the charter intact as it was passed in 2004, and this would be an addition. So I'll read this too. It's pretty complicated, so I want to go through it. The CRA, Community Redevelopment Agency, may award a height bonus of up to 20 feet for a total of 55 feet within the boundaries of the central business district, as such boundaries exist as of January 1st, 2022. The proposed project must comply with incentive eligibility criteria established within the downtown CRA plan and is conditioned upon final approval by City Council CRA plan. Final approval by City Council. The height bonus will terminate with the dissolution of the downtown CRA, either in full or for that portion covering the CBD. This is the area that we're talking about. So this is the central business district, 6th Avenue North to 2nd Avenue South, from 3rd Street to the ocean. So it's a very specific and defined area that, again, is designed to be the central business district of our community. The proposed criteria that we mentioned, while it won't be stated in the amendment, because that would just be way too much to put into the charter amendment that we would work through within the council and the CRA. But there would be some mandatory criteria. And again, this is just proposed, this is draft, it is all just very much on the drawing board for consideration. But some of the mandatory criteria that we've thought of, our project site must be at least one half a block and composed of at least the entire north, south, east, or west half of the block at a minimum. Structured parking is part of the project, either on site, through a partnership with a third party, or through a development agreement. Mixed use development is proposed for the site with commercial retail on at least the first floor. Building setback of at least blank feet after the first blank feet of height, TBD there. Architectural design must meet criteria established in the CRA plan. Selection of at least blank number of the optional criteria listed below. So the optional criteria that we have discussed are enhanced setbacks around the perimeter of the building, dedication of additional right-of-way to support enhanced pedestrian access, and both of those are required on certain identified corridors, creation of outdoor dining for public use, creation of rooftop amenities for public use, dining bar, etc., ground level pedestrian shade cover enhancements, arcades, overhangs, etc., the creation of workforce housing of at least blank % of all residential units proposed in the project. Dedication of public plaza, public access green space at no less than blank % of the site gross square footage. Preference on corners at street intersections. Installation of public art in an area accessible to the public valued at no less than blank % of the construction valuation of the project. Enhanced landscaping. Green building design using LEED standards. Publicly accessible amenities, restrooms, bicycle parking, etc. The installation or provision of any other public amenities subject to a development agreement with the city. It's a lot, I know, but I think that what you should take away from that is that we are putting the standards together and the requirements together that those developers must meet in order to get that additional up to that additional 20 feet. It's not automatically granted. There has to be a meeting of certain requirements and as well as optional requirements that would come through a development agreement. These are some examples. We don't have an example of every one of the criteria, but just to give you some idea of what we're talking about. So this would be a building step back. Step back is an architectural design element that is typically applied to the upper story of a development. So when you're standing on the ground floor, you can't even see how tall the building necessarily is.
Mayor, just want to emphasize that all of those buildings in that previous picture would exceed the additional 20 feet.
Yes, they would. Thank you.
That those are way tall.
Those are much taller. Thank you, Corey. These are just examples of the architectural design, not necessarily guides. Rooftop bar. Does anybody need a definition on that? Something we should have, but don't have enough of, if you ask me. Arcades. These are the covered passageways. Public plaza. So a couple of real life examples. This is the Hampton Inn in St. Petersburg. If you've been to St. Petersburg, you probably traveled around and saw a lot of really positive things that they've done with their urban planning. So this is an example of the setbacks. And you can see the building on the front here. You can even see how tall it goes behind it if you're on the ground level. This one's got rooftop, setbacks, outdoor dining, all sorts of great stuff. This is our own pier point. So this would be within, I don't know if we have the exact height of pier point.
Around 55.
So if this is an example of how high, this is as high as you could go with what we're proposing. This is La Playa in South Jacksonville Beach. You would not be able to build this building right now because of how high it is. But this is, I think, a beautiful example of a condo right there on the ocean. So I want to call a specific example to mind because this is one that probably a lot of us lost some sleep over watching at the corner of Beach and 3rd Street, which is now the Element Hotel. That lot sat empty for 17 years, and it was just an empty lot with a chain link fence around it. Because of the property was limited to 35 feet, so to come up with something that would work economically and be feasible, the owners of the property were getting contacted by CBS and I think Wawa as well. So we were looking at a building that could accommodate that size site at the parking that it needed to have or what the use was. But it ended up being the Element Hotel, and Sunny Vika is the owner of the Element, and he's agreed to give a comment or two on what he could have done with that additional 20 feet should he have been able to get it for that property.
So we had that land for about 17 years. 35 feet, that's the maximum that we can do. Parking, rooms, and all that. Always we have to look at the visibility of what makes sense. If we had 20 more feet, that means we could have done meeting space. This city needs meeting space so that we all could have our weddings or meetings together. We could have done food and beverage. We could have done so many of those things that we talked about. The bar at the top. We could have done retail at the bottom, so it would be very walkable where people couldn't on the side. So it would have been so much better as the main of what we could have achieved. We did the best that we could based on
What we have there now.
The Element Hotel.
Just the hotel?
That's the hotel. No food and beverage, no meetings.
Or all three visits?
Yes.
If it was 20 feet higher, where would everybody park with all that?
We also been able to think about it, 80 rooms, and we put about 80 parking spots. We managed to do that.
How about traffic? Do you know how many more people that there's community as far as on First Street and the intersections?
Absolutely. Any business or anything you bring traffic comes, but that also brings economic impact to the city, and it brings jobs.
been on Third Street.
Well, I don't want to get into a back and forth among the audience, so I'm going to go ahead and say thank you, Sunny, for giving us that input. But I will say, there are traffic estimates associated with any kind of development, but if you look at, I know when I go to a hotel at the beach, I park my car and I don't get in it again until it's time to go. But if that had been a Wawa or a CVS, I can assure you it would have been a much different story at that intersection. There was one time where we had three gas stations at that intersection. So, so thank you, Sunny, for sharing that. It would have allowed a little more creativity and publicly accessible areas such as meeting space and restaurant, things like that.
So in the whole block that we're discussing, there are areas that are already grandfathered in that are at 55 feet or higher. And I think those remove probably 10 to 15, maybe 20% of that area. And we're talking about very few areas that are actually have the ability to utilize this that aren't already developed. So, I mean, I'd really like to see exactly what areas, this could be utilized.
And that's a very good point. I saw someone on Facebook say, this will just be more Margaritaville. And ironically enough, the property owners of Margaritaville, when after the amendment passed, several properties sued and won vested rights to go above 35 feet. So you will still see properties going above 35 feet, and it is not by action of this council, it is because they have that right. Margaritaville, Dolphin Depot, property across the street, a couple other areas, probably two or three more areas, just south of Casa Marina, just south of Joe's Crab Shack, and then there's the high-rise condo going in the south end.
How did they get that right?
A judge gave it to them. They sued us and won. Yeah, so that's a whole other workshop. But they sued us and won, and we don't have, they have the right to go do that. So that kind of is one side effect of, if you have the right to go high, you're going to go high because you can and no one else can. So it gives you a unique advantage in the community. So we're not talking about Margaritaville. The only additional amount of feet maximum would be 20 feet. So 55 feet would be the highest of any building under this proposal.
Can you sell your vested rights if you own, and 10 years later, you haven't developed it and you sell the property, do your vested rights go with it?
I'm going to defer to our planning director, Heather Ireland.
Not for the properties that have current vested height rights. Those are specific to those parcels. So no, not for those.
So none of these new places that were developed recently were sold to another owner?
They have been sold to new owners, but they can't move those vested heights to a different property.
Right.
They're limited to that property, but they run with the property regardless of the owner.
Okay.
No matter how many times you sell it, the vested rights goes with that property?
Correct.
Good question. Oh, I'm sorry. So the question was about the vested rights and if that continues with the property, and the answer from our planning director is that yes, they do. So those are separate. Margaritaville, Dolphin Depot, like I said, a few other properties in the downtown area that will continue to go above 35 feet. Again, not by action of this council or any council, but because they sued and won. So after the slide, we'll open it up for additional questions and comments, but we're at the very early phases of even considering this. We did a charter review as a council starting last year into, we're still continuing it at this point. We hadn't done a wholesale charter review in many, many years. So we had a lot of work to do. For example, under the mayor section, it referred to key exclusively. So I'm glad that didn't negate my opportunity and ability to be elected, but some of it is just simple cleanup like that, but some of it we have some big issues like this one that are worth reviewing. This passed in 2004. Did it work? Has it accomplished what we wanted it to? Is it still working the way we want it to in our community? And that's what we're doing now. So what we would do after speaking to the community, getting input, if we move forward, the council would vote to put the amendment on the ballot, and then the voters would have the opportunity to decide. So we cannot unilaterally change the charter without vote. So you guys will get the chance to vote if we're gonna make the mayor gender neutral. So just keep an eye out for that on your ballot. But this would also be something that would go to the voters. So that's why we want to do our due diligence at the front end, see if this is something that is feasible for the community, that the community supports. And if we think it's going to work in the way that we want it to. And then it would have to be adopted by the majority of the voters in that election. So with that, I welcome your questions.
So this gets voted in, when you talk about boundaries, this plan proposed boundaries, and like percentages of increases in this, that, and the other thing. And I'm just curious, who decides to change those boundaries?
The boundaries would be codified in the new language. So
What would it take to change? Who can decide to change it? What would it take to change?
the way that we're proposing the language is that it could not be changed from January 1st, which is already passed. So the boundaries that we have right now, as they exist right now, could not be changed. I mean, they could be changed, but it wouldn't change the amendment. This is the boundary.
How can
This-
it be changed?
The boundaries could be changed, but this would be the boundary that affected that amendment.
But referendum.
Yeah, it would have to be, yeah, it would have to go to another referendum.
Yes, I mean, it sounds like there's a bunch of people here that have put a lot of thought and effort into this already. So I'd really like to hear from them how they think this is going to enhance, my life, to live here for decades and decades before, some of you were, out of diapers even.
Yeah, the question, yeah, how would it benefit, how would it?
What are the negatives of this? I mean, I would like to see, those of you that have put in a lot of, effort, and thought to this, how is that gonna affect my safety, my well-being, my enjoyment of life, the schools, the traffic,
I think the key thing that, okay, she asked how would it impact the quality of her life with regards to schools, traffic, et cetera. And I want to kind of go back to the basics. This gives us a carrot. This gives the city council and the community redevelopment agency a carrot to work with the developers to get them to develop something that we want, we as a community, that would be beneficial to the community. So, I mean, all those things, public open space, outdoor dining, first floor retail, those are all things that we've heard and is in every iteration of the CRA plan that would be a benefit to our downtown. So we want a downtown that you guys want to go to and want to enjoy, that we have opportunities to encourage retail. We don't have a lot of retail in our downtown, to encourage workforce housing, perhaps, whatever the case may be on that list of criteria that we would want to encourage and bring into our downtown. And downtown is designed for higher density. So we have parking, there are no other city parking lots anywhere outside of downtown. It's all downtown because those are that's the type of investment that we've made in the downtown to support that higher density. Now, those parking lots are not really very full until you get to 10 o'clock at night, because that's what our downtown is drawing at this point. But if we have offices, retail, restaurants, things like that, the downtown ideally would be busy at all times of day. Yes, sir.
Mayor, thank you very much for giving us this presentation.
My pleasure.
Some of us have lived here our whole lives. 30 years ago, or maybe 25 years ago, I came before this body and I spoke about the problem of letting people have over 35% lot coverage. I warned the body that if they gave anybody 37%, they would want 40. We are now working on 55% requests. I have a feeling that the same thing is possible here. Once you give somebody 55 feet, 2 years later or 4 years later at the next election, it's very possible you're going to have an amendment asking for 70 feet and so forth and so on. I worked very diligently. Myself and several of the other people sitting here were responsible for getting that 35-foot height ordinance established. We're the ones that stood on Beach Boulevard. We are the ones that went around and knocked on doors. We knew that if we didn't stop it then, it was going to get a lot worse really quick. We also know what's going to happen to the ones that are already grandfathered into this area. If you give anybody else any more height in that area, the problem is going to be the ones that people don't see yet, plus the ones that you're going to give them, and that's going to turn into downtown Fort Lauderdale. And that is exactly why we put that 35-foot height ordinance in there.
So I personally don't agree with that. I think there was a lot of slippery slope argument in there, and I can understand that it definitely is not hard to do that, to say, well, what about this, this, and this? Lot coverage is a whole different story, and that's something this council is planning on addressing with our land development code review. But in terms of this, I think we've talked to many experts, we've looked at other cities, we've talked as a body, we've talked to our planning department, and I think that an additional 20 feet is not unreasonable. In fact, my understanding is that carving out downtown with the original amendment was discussed, but it was going to make the amendment too complicated to pass easily. So I think it was contemplated then. I think it was a good idea then. I just don't think it was a winning approach for the amendment. It was also 18 years ago. So I wasn't quite in diapers, but anybody who was born that year is going off to college. So I think it's time to review and to look at it and to have some imagination and some creativity to our downtown. Again, we're not just giving them 20 feet. There is, I can't remember which, this is the mandatory criteria. There's 2 slides worth of mandatory criteria, and then there is optional criteria that would all come in a development agreement with our planning department, our CRA, and a city council. Let me see if there's any other questions before we come back to you.
I just want to concur with what John said. Many of us were standing there with him on Beach Boulevard and knocked on doors. For there to be 76% of people in 2004 is an overwhelming, huge percentage of the beach's residents saying we do not want over 35 feet. One of the words that you mentioned when you were describing the proposal is complicated. 35 is 35 is 35. That's not complicated. That's black and white, and I really feel like your proposal here, as John's saying, is opening Pandora's box. We start getting gray areas. 35 is 35, and I think that there's a lot of other things that have a negative impact on our city. No disrespect to the element or to our Margaritaville over here. There's a lot of recent things that are happening that our beaches community residents are not happy about, and I don't think you're going to find the beaches community to be supportive of this. 76% of people said no, and they meant no, and that's my personal opinion. The only other thing that I want to mention is that you've got the January 20th discussion virtual, and I'm really curious why that's virtual and why you aren't allowing people to stand forward and have a conversation.
So that's a briefing for the city council. So that wouldn't be an opportunity for public comment. We started doing our briefings virtually with the onset of COVID, and we've actually kept them virtually because we don't vote on those meetings. So it's an opportunity for us to discuss. We're going to basically take this meeting and regroup and see how we want to move forward for community meetings, table the issue, whatever the case may be. So we have 2 charter issues that have been put in the parking lot for us to bring back up at that meeting. So that wouldn't be an opportunity for public comment anyway. Ken.
I am very supportive of the high increase, but with 2 caveats. One is that on one of those slides, you talk about the CRA plan to be determined. I think it's important to remove the gray area, have the CRA put together the plan on how they see the downtown, how they effectively utilize in a very specific manner some of those examples that you have laid out, whether it be Latham Park Plaza, Pier Park Plaza, as it exists in our plan right now that we've agreed on. And so I think it would help remove that gray area if me personally could see how you intend to use that as Corey alluded to, we have just a few areas where we can use this development. So I think it's important that maybe calm some nerves and say, look, here's what we plan to do at blah, blah. And more specifically, and the second part of that, have a plan, but also execute the plan. We've had 2 plans. We didn't follow those plans. Let's get the specific and follow that.
Our intention would be to have those specifics figured out prior to it going to a vote. So there wouldn't be any blank spaces at that point.
So I'm curious as to those criteria. I know that the area can't be changed, but who can change the criteria and what you can do in that area with to get that additional height? And how does that just have to go back to people to vote on? So the criteria itself can be easily changed.
The criteria in the proposal as it's written now would be the CRA and the city council would have to approve the criteria.
So would it be up to the voters?
It would go back to the voters. The only thing that would be going to the voters is
amendment.
the actual amendment.
Right, and then my second part is with regard to, there's only a few lots, there are only a few lots unless certain lots aren't be developed. And so the ones that were examples that were given to me was Carrabba's and Walgreens. Like if a developer would come in and purchase half a block, even if there's structures on there, they can knock them down and then develop them to these standards as the criteria are set forth by the CRA. I just wanted to make sure that those were clear, because I think that was a question out there. And what was specifically noted was the boundaries, not the criteria, and they're 2 different things.
So I take exception with anybody that says that boundaries can never be changed. Because never is a pretty interesting word to use in a growth discussion.
It says this would be in the charter, and the charter is our constitution. We're bound by that, and it says this boundaries of the central business district as they exist as of January 22nd. So that, or 2022. That's this.
Aren't you doing the charter to do this? Do I misunderstand that?
This is what would be in the charter.
To include this, you're saying it can't ever be changed. And what I think I should be doing until we decide to change the charter again. At
Yes.
this point, it would hopefully come to public vote.
Yes.
I'm not trying to argue this, I'm sure.
Yeah. It has to go to public vote to change.
I also want to know.
Let me keep going around. I'm sorry you've had a chance to talk.
Who has the power to sell the city-owned property, which are the biggest blocks, which would be basically, unless you sold the block, several different businesses. They're the largest blocks, and obviously a oceanfront parking lot is not a big tax base, neither is the oceanfront, any of our properties. So who has the power to sell that because somebody wants to put a 55 or 60 foot or 55?
So the question is, who has the power to sell the city-owned properties? And that just depends on the property. Some of them are community redevelopment agency owned and some of them are city owned. So what would be more likely to happen is a public-private partnership to develop a piece of property that's owned by one or the other. And that would have to go through whichever body owns that property.
It would not have to be voted on.
It would not have to be voted on. Yes.
If this proposal goes through, assuming that they make all the requirements, could existing 35 feet properties have 20 feet added on to the
I would say yes. I would think so. If they met the criteria, yes, and we'll go over to this side of the room.
Have referred several times to all works.
I had said we all want this. Oh, okay. My apologies. Oh.
I'm really told you don't all want this. And I had some time invested in the Lakeland also. And I think we should consider that it's even more likely that people don't want this, because of what we've seen happen. We don't want to be like Miami Beach, some of us. I have been in a political fundraiser in one of those high-rise condos where people were lamenting the fact that we weren't like Miami Beach. Well, I think maybe they should go off and create another beach. To me, this sounds like a lot of mumbo jumbo, a big foot in the pool, because because it's not gonna stop, it never has. You can look back and see historical proof of this, because somebody comes in and says, no, we're not even gonna entertain these. They're not even hardships when you give them these variances. Really, you have to have hardship and make it more profit, it's not a hardship.
This isn't a variance. This is not, you don't have to demonstrate a hardship. for
Somebody
this.
else should refer to the lot coverage, and a lot of times I think they are, but anyway, what I see, this is a slap in the face and a kick in the gut to anybody that's been trying to stop this place from becoming a crime. And you're gonna get a whole lot of service jobs out of restaurants and bars, and I don't know how many regular folks here can afford to eat in a rooftop restaurant where the cocktails are like $12 to $15. I don't know. This is the question, I guess, I'm going on. How much density do they have to get out, bring out of this beach to make enough money to never satisfy? Give me a figure, percentage, something. Well, I'll tell you, the answer is they're never going to get enough. So I think you ought to say enough on it.
Thank you. Gentlemen behind you, have anything?
Thank you, Mayor. I saw one of the criteria in there was a certain percentage of workforce housing as opposed to part of the site. I was just curious how that's defined. And I know you're mentioning like hotel projects as well. How would you do workforce housing? Hotel would have to be a residential condo, which would, I think, affect traffic more than a hotel. Because people aren't just gonna park their cars there. They're gonna live there and you create a whole new stack from the residents. So, my question is, how's that defined? And will we have some way of maybe not, we don't more detail, less residential, or a way to balance that so it doesn't become the traffic is already bad? I just don't want to see.
So the optional criteria would be specific to the project. So if it is something that is apartments or some sort of housing project, then that's where that clause may come into effect. So I don't know where we get the definition for workforce housing. Is it the statutory definition?
There's different brackets of what's called workforce housing as qualified by the state. Specifically, one of the things we heard when we did community conversations over the last couple of years, some of the comments we heard was we do have the upper end housing and we have the lower end housing, but we're missing that middle bracket, the people who are making $40,000, $50,000 a year where they live in the city of Jacks Beach. So we would probably say that for workforce housing, we didn't put a percentage in, but the bracket we'd probably be targeting would be 80 to 120% of median income, which would be a bracket. When you start talking low income housing, you start getting into like the 30 to 50% of median income, which is a much lower income level in comparison to the rest of your area.
Is there a stipulation that people have to actually be working there at Jacksonville Beach?
I don't think we would be able to do anything that specific.
I would at least want people that residents that are make that part of criteria. Jobs here.
I can't even imagine trying to keep track of that, but I'm certainly making a thing out of it. Someone else over here, yes, sir.
Everybody has voiced their concern with traffic and all the potential negatives that can come with creating a high restriction. But to me personally, Jack's Beach is not a destination. There's a bunch of bars that attract a young group of kids, mostly from the net. They come up here at night. I don't want to be in Jack's Beach at night because there's nothing for me to do. There's no decent restaurant to go to. So I see Jack's Beach as this mixed place where you have good-looking buildings standing here that is high, and the next building is, 15 or 20 feet high. The owner of the property can't really make sense of it building at 35 feet because you have to have all the parking requirements. I'm not saying we shouldn't have standards, but can you take some time to highlight the benefits or the expected benefits identified in waiving the site restriction for development that the community might benefit from?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the criteria that we talked about in terms of the architectural features, again, it gives the community redevelopment agency and the city an opportunity to sit at the table with a developer and say, here are the things that we want for our community. We want rooftop dining. We want architectural, beauty with arcades, public plazas, we don't have a carrot right now to attract any of this. And when we don't have a carrot to attract any of this, you're gonna get what you get, you're gonna get what the developer wants to do, and we don't come to the table with anything to encourage those things that our community wants. Again, it's our downtown, this is where we want our density, this is where I want our offices, our restaurants, our housing. If you, again, same thing as a hotel, if you can come home, park your car on the weekend and walk or ride your bike everywhere, then that cuts down on traffic right there. So that's why downtown walkability is such an important thing that the CRA is also talking about. So all of those things that we are putting in there as requirements, both the required and the optional, those are things that we have talked to the citizens, have talked to the CRA, have talked to the businesses, want to see in our downtown area. So again, there's the mandatory and then there's the optional, and those optional ones would be specific to whatever the project is. There was another one over here. No, maybe not. Yes.
Should I suggest that? I mean, I know you've looked at other cities, but I'm wondering how many other cities you really looked at. And what really pops into my head is Stuart, Florida. If you look at Stuart, Florida, and the redeveloped downtown there, it is very unique. It takes up probably 6 by 4 blocks. It is one story. It is retail, restaurants, art, unique shops. It is busy enough where they run trolleys to offset parking. They have enough visitors in there for residents as well as people coming to town. And there's, I mean, I realize there are high rises in Stuart, Florida, but this is a redeveloped old downtown that works. And I can tell you, retailers are making money.
Well, and I think that
I'm thinking there's options, there's alternatives to high rises.
so, and again, we are not talking about high rises. I don't consider 55 feet or less a high rise. So just that might be our difference in opinion, but if you look at our downtown, and we have all gone to other cities, I know that probably all of you travel and look at other cities and what they're doing. When I'm walking down like a Delray Beach, you're walking along and there's stores, restaurant, and all of a sudden a parking lot, huge street surface parking lot. And that's really, if you look at an aerial of our downtown, look how much parking there is. So we don't really have the redevelopment. We almost kind of have to start over because we don't have the inventory of buildings to be redeveloped at this point. So it's not, I mean, you can look and you can draw examples from other places, but we have a unique situation and a unique opportunity, and it's hard to compare apples to apples. So,
I just feel like some of the simplicity of Jack's Beach is what I think attracts everyone here, not being annoying, not having everything block your view, your view of the beach block everywhere you look, and I just feel like that's, again, opening up a huge bag of worms. Said earlier, just changing this whole city. I mean, we're already, have to look at the monstrosity that wants to be where Adventure Landing is, and now, and then it's just.
But 35 feet.
Yeah, but
For the record.
I'm just saying, I mean, it's everywhere. Yeah, it's just an amazing place, and that's why we all love it. And bringing, coming from this end and from that end is just gonna, I feel like, take so much of that away from what we have and what we all love.
Brenda?
Well, thank you for all of this work that I've been doing. I just want all those blank spaces that, that I understand it's all to be negotiated.
We're gonna fill in all the blanks if we weren't gonna go forward with it, but.
Okay, well, my question, I think it was Georgette brought it up first and someone else brought it up, is that, since there's so many older structures in Jacksonville Beach, so it's my understanding from what I'm hearing that those could be torn down, and if the developer who wants to build something over 55 feet can meet the criteria, then they can come in and do that.
Not over 55.
Well, at 55.
No, they cannot come in and do that. They they would have to come in and do a development agreement with the city
Right, I
to
understand. that. So
meet the criteria and then the city would vote on whether they would be able to
So
get
what
that
is to
additional.
prevent the whole area becoming fifty-five? Because if I was a developer, I would definitely buy the property, even though it's expensive, and say, oceanfront property, for example, tear all those funny little buildings down and build something oceanfront. Now, when I was voting for the height limit, in the meeting, I actually said I wanted to let people do it. Because I felt like you could use some things like that would be like, patio areas to sit out, like we used to have. We used to have that on the oceanfront. We had patios to sit outside. We had amusement parks to go to. We had a really wonderful boardwalk, but that's all been changed now. And, take a look at the Metro College, for example, that's over a high building. And what does that accomplish? It didn't really have any facilities or business as much to go there. They all either can't afford it, businesses can't afford that or whatever, but it's just a big parking area with now it's just that whole bottom. It used to be like a restaurant. It's just some kind of, business for whatever, but it's a business, I guess. They had a patio out front and now there's no patio out front there either. So I don't understand. How can we convince people to do this wonderful plan? I know we all went through the redevelopment pictures and planning and all the cute little things by the pier where we could walk in and all these shops to go to and sit outside on the, we have the ice cream or whatever. It was wonderful planning, but all we got out of it is pavements on the road. All we got is like, which I don't really think those are very attractive by the time everybody puts all the gum down there and cigarette butts down there.
You've been talking to Ken.
No, but I'm just saying that, what we look forward to does not happen.
Yeah.
All we have is just like bars.
Oh, I agree with that. And that was before my time on council. I think that there was a little bit of a misfire with that round of redevelopment. But I also think that you can't say we want ice cream shops without also saying, can you please add an ice cream shop to your building and we will give you something for it.
So I think the citizens would be more inclined to be the ones who decided whether we like that building or not, instead of just the city council. But I know that's never gonna happen. But, it's just we're putting too much responsibility in the hands of a few people. When I know y'all are supposed to represent the citizens because we voted on y'all, but sometimes we disagree with certain things, and it scares us. I'm old. I'm pretty much lived my life in Jacksonville. I'm 77, he's 81. So we're not going to be around a lot longer, but we like to be like the places we used to go to, when you could go up to the bakery, or you could go to the bathing suit shores in the store. We have a few of those. But, I would like to see it change, but I'm just not so sure how we can do it without it hurting Jacksonville more.
As much as I would love us to go backwards and to have Pablo Avenue, which was our main street, which has the Chamber of Commerce and the library and the bakery, we can't go back. It's gone. We lost that in the 70s redevelopment. So then we got the Flag Pavilion and tore everything down, and we had that very sterile area around the Flag Pavilion, and we had the crab pot. And I know a lot of people look very fondly on the crab pot, but when I was in high school, this downtown was boarded up past Marina, Einstein's a Go-Go, which I was not cool enough to go to, the crab pot and the Flag Pavilion. So we have come a long way from that time, but we can't go back. The days of having a little bakery, one-story bakery downtown, I think they're over unless we can say you can have additional feet if you put a bakery downstairs. So the opportunity for us to influence what a private property owner does, they're limited. This gives us more of that opportunity. Not that we would say specifically a bakery, but retail, people would be able to put smaller parcels in. Right now we have huge retail spaces that aren't really realistic for a lot of the shops that we see at the other communities, Stewart and Del Rey, but even up at Town Center, that we like to see because the parcels are just too big. So
I agree with the desire to have people come in and have a better place to live and to work and to have entertainment. You mentioned that we were trying to do something that would encourage people to come in and invest in Jacksonville Beach. I remember when we did this the first time, we gave away a street in. We gave away a street in just to get somebody to come in and spend a dime in Jacksonville Beach. I think the first thing we ought to do is develop a rendering that will show you every building in the CRA that is capable of being raised now versus what might happen if we pass this amendment. So that everybody, including all of those of us here, can look at the picture and say, my God, there's already 20 buildings in downtown that we didn't know about. I mean, I don't know about everybody else here, but I couldn't tell you exactly which one of these buildings downtown can already be raised to a certain height. And I think it would be really valuable for all of us to see what it would look like if only the ones that are already authorized are raised. And I think a simple, artist rendition of that would help a lot. I also think that there's a lot of undeveloped property in downtown Jacksonville there beach already. For instance, the museum, the art, art building, I forgot the name of it. Yeah, I knew it comes in a minute. I think there's a lot of property in downtown Jacksonville Beach that already could be developed without having to be built or raised. And for God's sakes, the next time we decide to have somebody approve a design, please don't let it be metropolitan.
We all agree on that one.
I saw the artist conception for that when we started thinking about letting the building, and that's what we got. So
I think that that's a great example. One of the things that you said, we were trying to get people to come in and invest, and that's why we gave away a street in. We have people waiting to make significant investments in our downtown area. What we are faced with now is, are we ready to meet them and to work with them on what they're doing in our downtown area? Because there are plenty of things that can be done without us being involved at all. But if we can if we can get a developer to the table and work with them and try to encourage elements that we want, and I know I did use the word we earlier. It is a generalization that we want public spaces, that we want outdoor dining, that we want, rooftop bars and things like that. That may not be 100% of the people, but I would imagine it's many of the people that I've spoken to, the majority of people that I've spoken to specifically about this issue. So we have a reason to get the developer to the table to negotiate with us, to bring in those elements that we want in our downtown area.
What if you negotiate with the developer and say you want a shop? And a year from that point, they close the ice cream.
So it wouldn't be anything, I'm sorry, and I did say that it wouldn't be as specific as an ice cream shop. It would be ground floor retail. Yeah, so they would have to commit to that in terms of a development agreement. They would have to have retail at the ground floor.
So we have to say.
Well, I just want to agree with this gentleman here. I think it's very useful that we have some visual illustration that tells the people, the citizens, what is Jacksonville, downtown Jacksonville Beach going to look like when it grows up. And essentially, the CRA exists till 2047. And you yourself have asked the CRA, give us, I think you call it a quick look or a quick look. We could go to the developers and say, here's what we want to be. I think that's very helpful to all of us, because we've been burned twice with the 87 plan and the 2007 plan. So here's what we're going to be, and there's a commitment to make that happen. But I'd also like to include, part of that has to be discussion about this garage. Let's put this thing to bed, because we know there's a parking issue. So how is the CRA going to incorporate parking in addition to this other stuff? So I think it's a big thing, but they've got to start rolling up their sleeves and get to work on it.
I agree, and we are not going to devolve this meeting into a parking conversation, because that's a really quick way to drive a meeting off the rails. But yes, and you know that I agree with that. So I want to tell a really quick story. In 2004, when you guys were knocking on doors and standing on corners to support this amendment, 2 years prior to that, in 2002, I worked for a campaign called Smoke Free for Health. And we were the campaign that we had to go through a constitutional amendment in the state of Florida the same year as the pregnant pigs, amendment, if you remember that, because to change the Clean Indoor Air Act, because we were preempted by the state government. So we did the petitions, we had to get 500,000 petitions across the state of Florida. And the amendment was to make workplaces in Florida smoke-free. There were a few carve-outs, bars, cigar shops, private clubs, things like that. But most every other workplace had to go smoke-free. If you can think of a time where you could smoke in a workplace, especially a restaurant, that was not that long ago. So, so I can relate to the effort and the work that was put forth. When people hear that I did that I worked on that campaign now, they say, why didn't you include bars? And it was so obvious, bars should be smoke-free too. That's a workplace. Why didn't you include bars? Well, if we had included bars in 2002, it wouldn't have won. Because at that time, people thought if you can drink, you should be allowed to smoke too. So we left bars out. If we did it now, we could leave bars in and it would pass it would pass with 76% of the vote. I'm sorry, 72% of the vote. So I hear you, but I also know that it's 20 years later, things change, and we could definitely pass it with bars right now. In fact, bars are even going smoke-free on their own at this point. So I understand the effort and the doing what's right at that time with what you have, because I've been there. Stood outside of the Stop Chopping Worm Grunt Festival collecting petitions if you really need to know. So I understand, and I think it's the going to the voters, again, this is not something we do all the time. We haven't done a charter review in quite some time, so it's time to take another look at these issues. Any other, did I see any other hands?
I'm just curious, it's really not a question or, well, it is, but
I can't wait.
as developers approach the city, are they asking things from the city? I mean, are they doing a shop account with the 4 points downtown? I mean, we've got to kick in such and such for them to come.
We don't, so the question was if we are providing financial incentives to developers at this point, and to my knowledge, we are not. So we're not set up the same way as Jacksonville, and I don't necessarily see financial incentives as something that we would entertain. The incentives that this would be an example. There's other things that the CRA is working on in terms of being able to work with developers to bring in developments that we would like to see, but it's not financial.
Mayor, could you bring that picture up with the yellow outline? So if you change it to a 55-foot height limit, there's going to be developers coming in, and every building that's 35 feet, they're going to, or smaller, that area right there is going to be full of 55-foot high buildings. All those parking lots you see, they're going to disappear into cement structures, and we're going to see high-rise parking lots.
So we are not changing the height to 55 feet.
55.
We are not changing the height to 55
But
feet. You couldn't just come in and build to 55 feet. You would have to, and you would also have to have at least 1/2 a block, the entire side. I don't know what it's doing. I shouldn't have done this. You have to meet this mandatory criteria as well as the optional criteria. You wouldn't see downtown Jacksonville Beach turn into 55 feet. I don't think there's physically not any way possible that you would be able to do that because of the mandatory criteria that we have.
If you pass the law, they can build 55 feet.
No, they couldn't.
The developers would do it.
No.
They buy the land.
They have, this is what would be passed. They would, honestly, when you really think about this and you really look at this, it's very, very limited in scope. This limited in scope very much. Again, it just gives us the carrot to be able to work with certain properties and investors. Sorry, let me keep going on. I'll come back to you.
So you mentioned traveling around Florida to find a desirous spot. We can ride our bikes 2 miles down to 80 Neptune Beach Town Center. It's packed. It's in the demographic that we want. It's desirous and it's busy. There's a lot that we don't need to carry 35 feet to have it be productive and successful. The there's a lot going on, a bike right away that we really should be looking at, that there's a lot of other issues, whether it be crime or other things that are happening in downtown Jack's Beach that could be addressing, that we could be having much more desirous business coming in. And the carrot isn't 55 feet. I completely disagree with you on that. We've got a perfect example, a couple miles down the road that's phenomenally successful.
You.
I would also like to know if this is to go forward, how that is going to affect infrastructure. Third Street is, especially in that area, is famous for flooding. And I know all of our tax dollars, we put huge amounts of money into alleviating and flood control in the city. But taking that space and making it cement.
Well, and again, that's a mischaracterization because one of the options is public space, it's green space. That's one of the options. So it's not necessarily a concreting over of our downtown. The other, as far as infrastructure, like I mentioned, the CRA has been working for decades on stormwater drainage, on streetscapes, and making sure that infrastructure can support the density that we could have there. So I think that that's something that has been very much a priority for the community redevelopment agency. Yes, ma'am.
How tall is the sushi bar going in?
Oh, it's not. It's
I would think
sushi
it's
bar.
35. It's max 35. I don't know exact height.
So it's max 25, there's a rooftop bar going on with that.
Yeah.
So I'm not convinced that we need that extra 20 weeks to have green spaces in one sale and rooftop bars. That's what you're selling us. I mean, I would rather see a more thoughtful downtown, but not all the buildings just fill up.
Anybody else? Yes.
Can you go back to the video?
How far back?
So that's what we looked at, like the whole curve, that building that's ever been designed.
No. This is an example of a building setback.
No, I understand. But that's what the example that you're showing us, that's what the development will look like. Every other building curve.
No, this is an example of the architectural style. So,
I fully understand.
okay, so you're
But all the buildings are 55 feet.
right.
So that's what you want.
Those are
No.
not 55 feet.
This is just an example of a step back.
And that's what the community will look like.
Those are not 55. Those are higher than 55.
I understand. So that's what's gonna happen. They're gonna get over 55 feet, just to their point, you're gonna go to the pond.
To go higher than 55? Okay, no.
To this guy's point, it works at 35. So why don't people make it work at 35?
If we don't do this, then we would have to. Yes.
One of the biggest factors that led to a blighted area was the infrastructure was so degraded. Nobody thought about that. They put in a big stormwater collection box and all this other stuff. It's in there. You can't, they couldn't run a restaurant or a bar with 6 months later in stores. And then that got improved. So now I've heard a couple of things that I feel strongly about. I've heard some financial incentives for public private. Public never really puts from that. They always want to increase in that. And that's the right view. Aren't these guys and investors competent business people? Do they need my help to make some money?
I don't know if that was a question for me or a rhetorical question. Again, we are looking at helping the people who want to invest in our downtown do things that benefit the community.
Are these investors, do they live here?
I mean, there's,
Are they,
I think we have a mix of all sorts of different property owners in our downtown.
Because I think it's very important to have people who are investing that they assimilate to our community, so that they actually know what the community is made up and does, and how we run. Before, they just decide what they want to come in and do. It would be more effective. to get to know the community. And, it's just a suggestion, as far as instead of just coming in and changing the look because it's something that they have seen somewhere else. And they don't. As well as.
Yes, sir.
Is there an expectation that all these undeveloped range lots that are currently grass will get developed if these changes take place?
That was a generalization. Do you have a specific lot in mind?
Well, Dolphin Depot, for example, has been flattened for a long time.
Dolphin Depot already has vested rights to go above 35 feet.
Right, but for an example, is there an expectation that properties that either should be demolished or has been demolished, that those lots will be developed, like you said, his property was undeveloped for 17 years? Is there an expectation that if a high restriction is raised, that those vacant properties will actually get developed to survive the traffic and kind of stuff?
I would think so. And there's very few vacant lots that don't have vested rights right now, but I think if there was an empty lot sitting there and they had the opportunity to be a little more creative with their property, that would be an incentive for them.
So that should speed up the development and the future plan objects. Is that the motivation behind the property?
I think that's part of it for sure. But again, to be able to have that carrot to come to the table with that developer and say, you've got this piece of property, if you can do A, B, and C required, and then D, E, and F optional, then we'll give you an additional 20 feet. So this is not it's not a 55-foot high limit. It is not it's only in those 6 blocks or 8 blocks north and south in our downtown area, but it would be very specific and handled on a case-by-case basis, is all I can say. So, yeah.
The grandfather properties right now that can already go above 55 feet. They could be doing this and building legacy. They could have done it since 2004. Yet the vacant properties have. So
They are big.
they have the ability to do it right now, yet they're not doing it. What else is going to incentivize them? For the grandfather, they can do it now.
Yeah, this isn't for them. They already have.
I understand that, but the properties that could be doing it right this minute are not doing it.
They are doing it.
Have not done it
They are doing it.
for years.
I mean, we've seen 3
Dolphin
different
Depot,
proposals on Dolphin Depot.
They're getting their plans finalized. We have another hotel going in. You know, the ones that have the vested, that are vested in, we're only down to, there was 13 originally, and I think there's only a handful that haven't been.
Well, I mean, you have the economy dropped out in 2008, so you had quite some time where no building and no investment was happening, and so it's taken some time to recover. But again, now it's recovering, so we are going to see that development downtown. So again, at the height that none of us have any say so in. So, but I would think each property has a different reason for not being developed, and probably some of them are financial, some of them are just trying to find what they want to do. So, yes, sir.
Just to clarify, if they had vested rights and sell that property, that doesn't carry over.
It does. Yes, ma'am.
That was sold.
Approximately how many of those lots have already been sold that are allowed to?
That have been sold. Dolphin Depot, the lot north of south of Casa Marina,
Directly across the street from Casa Marina that has.
across the street from Casa Marina, Delicom. Well, that's going to be Spring Hill Suites, the Spring Hill Suites, that's right, and then just south of Joe's Crab Shack.
No, just
Okay. The condo, if we're talking about just downtown, those are the properties, and then there's a condo down it was the waterfall project, now it's in store. That can go above. Questions? Georgia.
Thank you. I would like staff to, before we discuss this as a briefing, because there was a great point that the land beach and everything beach 35 feet. What they don't have there that we do have here is parking requirements. So if they wanted to put in a restaurant or all that, they don't have to have as much parking on the site as we require here. So I'd like something from staff looking at if height is not going to work, what can we do with parking requirements? Because I believe Sunny, if he didn't have the parking requirements, he was going to be able to do a lot more, even though he couldn't go above 35 feet. It was the parking requirement that kind of hemmed him in. So I think that would be a good middle ground from what I'm hearing here. This isn't necessarily representative of the whole city, but I think that is a good middle ground that we can still have incentive. We can still attract, but not without the concern of not the area change, not the boundaries, but the criteria as to what we can do in those boundaries changing without having to go back to a vote.
And I wanted to say that one of those things that in that criteria, that 20-foot addition is not one of the criteria. That would have to be passed by the referendum with the people. And additionally, we keep hearing 55 feet, but not everybody's going to qualify for an additional 20 feet. Some people may only get 10 feet, or they don't have the incentives to provide to the city. So it's not a blanket, hey, go look yourself 55 feet. It's not as simple as that. They have to provide these incentives in order to go up any distance. And the amount of feet that go up is based on those qualifications that they have to meet. And so those criteria, those can change. The height of that 20 additional feet cannot change. And you have to qualify for that total maximum amount. So it's not as simple as, hey, go build 55 feet.
I think the concern ends up being is if the criteria are removed by vote of council and CRA. I think that is the main fear. Because if they wouldn't get to have a say in that, then anybody could build up 55 feet. That would be the worst case scenario.
And also the architectural thing is important, because you see what that's attractive.
Yes, I also agree with
More
you,
control over the architecture.
Yeah.
Look at the building.
which is one of the criteria as well.
That's just one of them.
I can tell you that I've met with developers and all of them that I've met with really take a vested interest in our community and don't want to come in here to build a skyscrapers or structures that look like just a square box. They really want to build incentives for the city to have a vested interest in here. And there's examples of it that are already in place that are being developed right now. So I've never heard from anybody that says, well, you know, we're going to do what we want to do anyways. We have land property rights, which they could do that. An example of that's eventually, if they come here and build it, they have property rights, but they want to work with us. And so what we're trying to do is develop a plan where we can work with them and make it better for everyone.
Eventually, that you can't build it. They have to work within their area.
I'm gonna go ahead and say this isn't an adventure landing workshop. Dan, you guys talk after this meeting.
My goal,
Oh, Corey, go ahead.
you know, one of my goals is to have small locally owned businesses in our downtown business district. So the residents in our community can have businesses and then their neighbors are gonna come down and visit them. And we're gonna have our community coming to the downtown business district and our residents will have a vested interest in our downtown. That does not exist right now. And that's the transformation that needs to happen. We need to have a pedestrian, bicycle friendly area, and that's my goal.
To follow up on that, that is an absolutely excellent goal, but I don't think 55 feet, even the additional, if you get you that, if you're just looking at small locally owned businesses can't purchase half the city block to be able to.
No, we can
So
have the retail, we can have the retail on the bottom floor.
And I think that that's what we're missing. And again, if you look at Neptune and Atlantic Beach, there's a lot of little small shops because they're, you know, it's designed that way. We don't really have any little walkable shops. So having that retail on the first floor and not killing our walkability every time you walk past the parking lot, that's something that I would like to see us definitely do better.
Let's just say this whole thing is passed, okay? And the developers start coming in and they say, yes, we're meeting A, B, C, D, E, F, all of your criteria. Oh gosh, we want to change this. What process is that? Is that then going to planning for a variance? Or how does that work? Because I've seen what we're doing with variance also. You know, you just look at those meetings and go, 35. You know,
So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Heather Ireland, our planning director, Mike Stepopoulos, our city manager, lest I forget to make sure you guys know who they are. that there would be a development agreement where all of the mandatory and optional criteria would be hammered out, and that would go before the city council for approval. So again, you guys, as citizens, would still have an opportunity to voice an opinion on that development agreement before we approve it.
A variance, I know, within 350 feet of there, I don't have to get notice of the variance.
It's not a variance. This would be a vote of the city council, not the board of adjustment. So it would be something that we would vote on as a council. So that's a great question. So, and for those of you listening at home, the question was, what would the process be of approving a change to the requirements of the mandatory or the optional requirements? Good question. Yes, sir.
I have two comments. The workforce housing is a challenging thing in the CBD or anywhere that we should go with property taxes. And I think to make the future of Jacksonville Beach downtown successful, you want the mix of residential, retail, commercial. That combination mixed use is really important for the ecosystem of the kind of traffic that we really want to have in downtown. If workforce housing has a criteria there, at any percentage is going to reduce the number of residential units that get built in these 2-3 developments, and it's going to change the demographic of what we have. I think that is a condition to certainly be considered, because property developers, investors are not going to, they're going to look at their overall cost of building, they're going to look at their property tax and say, if we're paying this property tax the same as the guy next door, why would we subsidize workforce housing here? Let's make it all commercial and put no residential in it.
I think you're making a great point here. Workforce housing isn't one of the optional criteria, so it wouldn't necessarily be in every development agreement. But that's our point. If we want workforce housing downtown and you want more height, then you need to meet us halfway on that. So you don't have to build any workforce housing, but if you want more height, that may be one of the things that we would expect out of that development. So that's exactly the point. Maybe you don't want first floor retail space, but if you want more height, that's something that we're going to ask of you. So that is exactly the example of the give and take that would happen. You can either maximize your housing and make the highest rent or the highest revenue on your condos or whatever, or you can have additional height, but some of that's going to need to be workforce housing. There was another, yeah, Mike.
Just to answer a little bit more of your question about the workforce housing, if it's a true workforce housing project, then you're able to apply for tax credits through the state. And that's where they find some equity in comparison to market rate units. But typically you need someone who's done work with workforce housing to understand what you're applying for at the state level and get those credits to offset charging lower rents for certain types of income people.
And does those credits make up for the differential, for example, property taxes? Do you have any idea about that?
It's really more on the developer's end to see what the cost benefit is of doing the workforce housing component. But again, it depends on what they're targeting. Typically, the lower the income brackets that they're targeting, the higher the tax credit they get at the state level and for a longer period of time. So normally, if there's going to be a workforce housing project, there will be very specific developers that are coming to the table because they have experience doing workforce housing.
You had a second point that you were making?
Yeah, the last point I want to make is the demographic of traffic and how people move around is also changing. So is there going to be a consideration for parking? Because I don't like the idea of, if we're going to go higher, that we have all these parking lots that are sitting half empty or empty. We already have a bunch of public parking. A lot of people Uber, a lot of people on bicycles. Increase foot traffic and reduce car traffic. Shouldn't we incentivize the overall movement in that direction somehow with the parking?
Yeah, definitely. And that is that second in the mandatory requirement, which is with regards to parking. Yes. The optional would be specific per project, that it would be additional negotiated in the development agreement. So I don't, and again, they're draft and we're still considering which ones, would even be in it, which ones we like, do we have the right ones? You know, taking information from what we're hearing today, are there things we would want to change to make this more palatable, but it would all be hammered out in that development agreement. They would do the optional would be, they would have to do the ones that are put in their development agreement. They don't have to do every optional one, but some of those would be pulled out and put into their development agreement. Right.
Speaking of parking, you know.
I love talking about parking.
To allow them to have, less parking on their lot. I know Jacksonville Beach has forever thought about letting parking lots. So we had the 55 foot and then we were going to 55 foot parking lot. Is that correct? With some space around it to sit and have lunch or
You know, again, I don't want to devolve into talking about the parking garage, but yeah, the big garage with a rooftop bar would be great. But no, and I think that we have considered, and the CRA continues to discuss the possibility of adding structured parking in the downtown. Again, that may be part of a public-private partnership. That may be, yeah, and that, you know, I said many times, I don't want to build a garage that says they're empty. So if you have developers that's their parking for their development, then they would use that parking garage, you know, because that's where their employees or residents or whatever.
Is this amendment going on about 22 or 24?
If this is not an amendment, this is an idea. So no, and that's something that the council, as a result of our charter review, we have a lot of amendments that are going to be on the charter. So you guys make sure you do your homework for the next couple of elections, because we're not going to put them all on one ballot. We're going to spread them out because, again, some of them are cleanup, some of them are substantive. So the council is going to be going through the whole list of what we need to put on the ballot and decide to determine where.
So some will be for 22 and some will be for 24.
And maybe beyond.
There's 23 also, there's multiple elections.
Yeah, so we can do like the city of Jacksonville elections, potentially we could have them. I thought I was gonna be able to go through this presentation like 4 times and just turn new people in, but any other questions, comments?
It's really a comment. It's kind of going back to this workforce requirement. I'm trying to think of who in other big cities, even large cities, do this. And the only ones I can think of that really a development would do that is if you are a true resort town where you have a season.
So
Or a Orlando.
I wouldn't foresee an entire development of workforce housing, but there are properties that carve out a certain percentage of workforce housing. So it's not just hospitality industry, it's nurses, police, you know, there's a lot of people that would, you know, and again, it just depends on what the quality is.
No, I mean, there's a lot of it in major cities. I mean, New York has rent control places and stuff. I think that's the same kind of concept. I mean, personally, I'm fine removing that option if it's an issue, but I don't see somebody coming in and putting a full workforce housing. I think it might be one apartment on a floor or something.
Yeah, like a 10% or something like that. Alex.
So, you know, in the 2007 vision plan really desire mixed use construction where you got retail on the ground floor and residential above. But you don't get mixed use construction and that sort of density without getting some addition to the height limit. And the one thing that we haven't talked about here is the value of having people living above that retail. People living in this area adds vibrancy to the street. People walking around brings more people there. People feel safer. There's reduced crime because you have eyes on the street. These are all, I mean, if you look at the research, having true mixed use where residents are living above retail adds to vibrancy, adds to safety, adds to revenue for the local business owners. So I don't want us to miss out on that value that was in the 2007 vision plan. One of the main things that was desired, and under the current code, it doesn't work. And so I think the biggest benefit, what I see, by allowing a height increase in order to get the right type of development that the city and the CRA agree on, the big value to that is that the vibrancy on the street, increased revenue for local business owners, and increased safety. And I think that's what we want in our essential business.
Thank you. Well put.
I would say that the biggest value that Jacksonville Beach offers is the beach view. And, you know, the ability, that's why I don't think it was a pretty effective process. It was great. I mean, a little bit back and have a beach view and one more and hold it still. But now, you know, my fear is that a bunch of developers are coming in there and they're gonna say, hey, let's create a beach view for ourselves. Essentially steal it from the folks that we want in and destroy their back. So one proposal or thing to think about, because the value is beachfront property, we're not doing that beach. Is as you get closer to the beach, you need harder to build structures that are right along the beachfront. That's just going to destroy the beach. Destroy property value and destroy. Is that really?
And I agree, it's even 6 blocks away.
Do you live here? Okay. 55-foot building?
But it's on Third Street, it's not destroying.
It's east of Third though, but I mean.
There on the beach.
You know, that's why over 70% of the citizens voted for the 35-foot height limit, because they don't want to see all that cement on the ocean front.
Well, again, we're talking about our downtown area. We're talking about our commercial district, not our residential.
The beach access in that downtown area, you've got all that parking. It's a great way to get to the beach. It's great beach access, and that's what people want to preserve. And once you fill that up with 55-foot buildings and you're decreasing beach access, you're adding more cement, more walls. That's what people don't want. That's why they voted in such numbers last time. And that's going to happen again, especially when they see the plan. It is a Pandora's box.
I think that the argument of the beach view being the value to downtown is just one part of the value. I would say if I were a restaurant or a commercial entity, there's ideally, if I were investing down here, I want parking, walkability, proximity to other retail restaurants, things like that, kind of the crowd draws the crowd. So like Alex was saying, if you have a vibrant community all day long, that increases your public safety. You have people out there all the time, less opportunity for, bad actors per se. So I think the beach view is just one part of being in this downtown district. So I don't think that that's the only thing. I think that's part of it. It's a big thing. I agree. Yes.
The gentleman brought up beach access, and I lived here for 35 years. Next to today's draw, I think most people come to this community, access to the beach. How will we guarantee that none of our beach access is set up and on the weekend? We're very popular with everybody from Jacksonville. So we'll guarantee that we won't have street ends shut down or access stop from coming on the beach.
The process of turning over a street end is an entirely different endeavor, and I don't think that that's even something that it's in the charter. We can't turn over a street end without a vote of the electorate. So we don't have the power to turn over a street end. Yes, sir.
As far as the beach access versus mixed use, so say you took a parking lot, replace it with a mixed use building. That's hypothetical. You think that more people, more business would come to Jacksonville, that people that actually live there in that mixed use building, or patronizing areas around it, for people that come from over the bridge to go park their cars in the parking lot, to go sit at the beach for 10 hours a day. I kind of argue that the mixed use development would get us more patronage and be better for the businesses than people just come over here to use the parking lot.
I agree with that. I do.
As a Jacksonville Beach resident, you already use it.
Yeah.
You ride your bike down there.
Yeah. I don't go downtown.
Central. I never come there.
Yeah.
I take my bike or I go to one of the other places around the park, not out here, right? So I would say, I'm a little bit mixed on this, whether I agree with it, I would say you get more desirable patrons out of these.
Yeah, I'd much rather have somebody walk downstairs and go to the restaurant or the store or whatever than to drive in, park, and utilize those resources. I do think it would be a mix. I think it always will be, but I think we need to balance it. Because right now, the people that are utilizing downtown are largely not residents. They are people coming in from other places.
So do you not have the vision without having the height?
Can I not have the vision without having that?
So in other words, you're wanting to have the vision of a new development as far as the downtown Jacksonville Beach. But does it have to also be combined with the height? Like, can people not invest in the property that's here already? Rebuild at 35 feet
No, certainly they can.
and still get the structures that you're looking for and you know what I mean?
They don't have to. I mean, again, that additional 20 feet is an incentive tool for us to help encourage the structures that we and the types of businesses and the type of development that we want. So certainly somebody could come down and spend their money on, you know, a 35-foot building, and plenty of people have, but I think we see that, or I see that, I don't want to keep saying we, as the delta between a builder coming in and building what they want, and a builder coming in and sitting at the table and partnering with the city and looking to see what we want in order to gain that extra 20 feet. Sorry, there's gentleman back.
To respond to what the young lady just said, many years ago, we tried the referendum to limit the height. And we see the result. There's no development, there's no progress. It's like, and I would to bet that a lot of the people who live in Jacksonville Beach, they go to Reed and Neptune Beach. Because that's what the action is. Okay? It's safer, better restaurants, better quality, better revenue. So status quo, that a lot of people are pushing for, you see the result. It's been stale for the last 15, 20 years. So we need to encourage people, developers, to come in. And as somebody else mentioned, the property taxes and the value of the land, developer is handcuffed to do anything unless he's given the opportunity to provide more housing units for people. And people, you know, I used to say, when you turn on the lights, the cockroaches run away. So people, you should take it the wrong way, you know what I'm saying? But people bring safety, people bring revenue to the businesses, and businesses stay open instead of, you know, shut down and close and stuff like that. And they also bring diversity. We don't have just bars and restaurants. We have many other businesses, gift shops, dress shops, and everything else. So I believe that the vision to increase it, it's a good one. And I believe it's something that's going to bring a change to Jacksonville Beach.
The only people that want are the developers. It's gonna get shut down again. And I'm wondering what you're gonna do with all that money that you.
Mitch, I'm sorry, I'm calling on.
Well, all
It's
the,
Heather's turn.
the money that you anticipate coming in from the tax base.
It's Heather's turn. Go Heather.
Just really quick, I just want to comment that the Metropolitan was designed to be a mixed use. Condos, if people got into, the parking garage was there, the business is on the bottom, some are still there. And it's, and what's going to keep these new businesses, developers that may come in, meet all the requirements, get their 55 feet, do what the city, what everybody was wanting. And 5 years down the road, there's a bunch of empty retailers because there's not enough people in the winter, for example, okay, to like support the smaller mom and pop shop that maybe can afford to rent there. That's just one observation. We kind of did that and look at it, and it has this parking garage whole thing going on. And it's an eyesore now when you walk by because too much taken on First Street. And the other thing I would just say, I think as a resident, is most alarming to me is that I'm here now and we have all of you guys in city council. But what's going to happen when these city council members come in? I understand it's to be written into charter, but just as we're sitting here today, there could be that
new vision. Now, you know, again, we're commented, well, 55, or maybe now they want to come and say, we can just do 7 stories. That would be best, you know? So I guess it's just that kind of unsettling feeling of change is inevitable, but people also change. And so that means the vision of this beach, I mean, I'm born and raised here, I've seen it change at a time, and I'm just thinking, well, what's going to happen in 20 more years? I just keep on that to Metropolitan because I just think that's a prime example of something that could be a possibility at 55 feet.
Well, and
all of those, how are they gonna fit?
But again, I think that was to have a successful mixed use building with retail on the first floor, you have to have walkability. And when you have your entire city block next door is a parking lot, it doesn't work. So if you have a critical mass of, and even Pier Point has retail on the first floor, but nobody's walking by Pier Point at this point. They're driving to Pier Point. So if the downtown has more first floor retail and doesn't wait until 10 o'clock to come alive, that's going to support all of the first floor
I
retail.
have to say really quick, Georgia, what you said about the parking is just spot on. As far as we need to be looking at changing the parking versus, I think, going up, because if Jack's Beach can operate more like Neptune Beach can, I think that's very attractive. And now you have the walkability that you want because you're not sitting all these. This time of year, and the parking lot sits pretty empty all day.
Yeah.
So you're spot on, I think, Georgette. We talked about parking on Monday, and this year we're gonna have a comprehensive LDC review, which we're gonna look at parking all across the city. It is an issue down here, but you talked about what's the guarantee of business from succeeding. You get a development agreement that makes sure, I come from a development background. I've participated in a lot of development agreements, but none in this area, but it's a guarantee that what's going to be built is what's going to be built. Once it's built, there's no guarantee that a business survives. We can look to Neptune Beach. There's been businesses that have come and go in Neptune Beach, and we just talked about how great that area is because of the walkability and all that kind of stuff. There's no guarantee. It's a capitalist economy. There's no guarantee. We want businesses to survive. What's going to make the business survive is all of us in this room patronizing that business, and that's what we want. Is I would say the majority of the people here are Jack's Beach residents. We want to go to Jack's Beach businesses. When I choose to eat out, 95+% of the time it's at a Jack's Beach business. There's a couple times where I'll go to Neptune Beach, but I'd much rather stay in Jack's Beach because I heard somebody say there's no good restaurants in Jack's Beach. I'm glad there's no restaurant owners in here because they probably take offense to that, but there are great restaurants here at Jack's Beach. There's places to go on date nights. There's places to go with our families, and I feel like that's doing my part to help these businesses succeed like we all should, because we should take pride in our community. And that's what we're kind of saying here is that we want to take pride in the community. We want everybody to take pride in the community and not be a downtown that's full of bars that were great. They're great sometimes. Like I love to go watch a Jags game at the Bricks. It's a great, fun atmosphere. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be there at midnight on Saturday. It's just I can't do that anymore. But I want a place to where I can go with the whole family. I want a place where I can go without the kids. I think those of y'all that have had kids know the importance of leaving them at home with the babysitter. But we also want to take them to do things with us, and that's kind of what we're talking about here today. And I hope that if this does go and we have businesses down there, that we all choose to patronize Jack's Beach and not patronize Neptune and Ponte Vedra, because I know that I try to make the conscious decision to patronize Jack's Beach businesses every chance I can over businesses in Neptune and other areas, because it's important that we support those around us who are investing in our city. So that's kind of just a little tidbit.
Thank you, Chet. And we probably should have started this meeting off by saying, like, no offense, anybody. No offense, like the building owner. No offense, so we'll just blanket, no offense. But thank you for that comment. Anybody else on council?
I know, I agree with Chad and my colleagues here. We all want the best for this community. I fell in love with this community when I first got stationed here. And I remember the old buildings, when I first moved here, First Street down had been torn down. Trent Charlie's was still there. And it was empty for 17 years. And, you know, I feel bad that he had limits on his hotel when he could be maximizing his profit if he would have been able to go 10 feet more, having a rooftop bar with a restroom or something. And just everyone else goes to Neptune Beach. I go over there too. There's some great restaurants here. Unfortunately, they're spread out. 11 South, love that place. I wish we had it here downtown. I wish we had a Mezzaluna here. I wish my friend Catulo, the Italian restaurant that he has, I wish he would open it here. But unfortunately, we don't have some space. And I just really want to see downtown get developed to really enjoy coming here with the kids, your grandkids, and so forth. But looking forward to the workshops if we have to.
I wasn't hungry until you started mentioning all those restaurants. Now I could go for some karaoke. Other comments? Yes.
The one thing that you could have used as an example was Dolphin Depot. They came in front of this, your council twice. First time they were approved, I think, about three stores. The Dolphin Depot, when it was approved the second time, was at their maximum of 56. Those rendering drawings would have been a really good example to show everybody what 55 feet would look like with ground floor retail, parking, and the upper stories were going to be 50-50 hotel and apartments. So, or condos, excuse me. So anyway, that you may want to put it online as an example, because you should have it archived those drawings. That way people visualize what you're talking about. 55 feet doesn't mean squat to the average person. So I mean, 55 feet may be a skyscraper or something, and maybe something smaller. Yes, but that doesn't show you what you're asking for. What you're asking for is Dolphin Depot, retail on the bottom. You've got parking, and then you also have the upper stories that were hotel and condos. So it's just an idea that give people a visualization and to give them a better idea of what they're actually asking for, getting or not.
Thank you for the comment.
You know, I agree, and actually, I live in that building. My view of the ocean here would be blocked if somebody chose to build 55 foot across from me. I would much prefer have a vibrant downtown, that walkability, that, you know, I'm not going to sit and stare at the ocean every day. You know, I mean, I can walk out there and see it, but I think a vibrant downtown where our residents have, all of Jacksonville Beach have a vested interest in our downtown is really critical to creating the downtown business district that I would personally like to have. You know, I want to have outdoor cafes. I want to have, you know, larger sidewalks. I want to have our local residents owning businesses down there and more opportunity to be able to do it.
I agree. What about your two? I don't have one. We all in this room care about the city. Obviously, we care about the city. The relevance of being how we get it to. We all agree we want small businesses downtown. We want vibrant downtown. The crux is you don't want a tall downtown. Part of you don't want a tall downtown. The other part, they're okay with it tall being 55 feet. But we have discussed it amicably. One of my favorite lines is, I teach public administration at UNF, and one of my favorite lines is the first episode at the end of Parks and Rec, when Leslie Note says, "When I hear people yelling at me, I hear them hearing loudly." And I let staff know that one a lot, and there was no yelling, and that was absolutely lovely. But I don't necessarily have an opinion one way or another. My goal is to make sure that you all know all of the pros and all of the cons. That is why I really like to see that parking piece included. If there's no height, what about using parking as an incentive? You know, you don't necessarily, if you want to do this, you don't have to provide X amount of spaces. And I think that kind of an incentive package is something we might want to think about for the CRA to help alleviate this rug that we're having right now. I don't know if it's going to be future meetings, future gatherings, but I thank you all for being here tonight, and I really have enjoyed hearing your feedback.
And we can all agree on this one.
Just want to, absolve as you see, actually, we're purchasing property here and the parking is very so strict.
And I think that's something we can definitely, we are all definitely on the same page as far as taking a look at.
I've heard parking issues from more people than I have with height. I hear height from certain individuals, always parking.
I'm sorry, were you confined? Okay, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I guess just one more comment. I really like the idea of vibrant, and I thoroughly agree that, more eyes on the street are probably safer. However, I get really concerned because most of these probably will be top condos, which increases density in the city, which puts a strain on our schools. I'd like to hear from our chief of police, because even if you're buying a half $1 million condo, it does not mean that you're totally doing things legal all the time. So I would like to see their input as far as how this is going to impact the safety in our community. And people living in a condo are not going to be walking all the time.
Thank you. Good comment. Anybody else? Well, I guess, oh yes.
Or you gonna plan on having another workshop?
So thank you for the segue to the conclusion. So as I don't remember if it was you or I think it might have been the Calvert. We are going to regroup as a council at our next briefing. I think that's Thursday, 20th, whatever day the 20th is, and discuss the two main items that are kind of still under discussion as far as our charter goes, and how we want to proceed with those. So we will take this meeting, the feedback that we've been getting from citizens, business owners, et cetera, and we will decide, do we want to set up more community meetings? How do we want to go forward? So I appreciate all of you very much. I did not think that everyone was going to sit here for 2 hours, but again, you're hearing very loudly, and I appreciate you not yelling at us. But I felt there was a lot of open minds. A lot of people have worked really hard to contribute to the character of this community, and I value that and appreciate that. So thank you so much for being here, and to the people who have joined us via YouTube, thank you. And we look forward to continuing this conversation. It is a conversation. This is an idea that we think will enable us to bring some positive development into downtown Jacksonville Beach, and it's going to take all of us to move it forward if this is the direction that we want to go. So we look forward to continuing the conversation. Any wrap up thoughts from anybody else?
For the council briefing, the 20th is Thursday. It will be at 5:30. You can watch it on YouTube. And the two issues that we'll be talking about is height and increasing the number of liquor licenses.
It's not increasing the number of liquor.
That's how many. What should the number of? How do we want to define what the number of liquor licenses will be? I think is the best way to put it.
Yes.
So that's on YouTube. It's a briefing.
So it's council, so there's no voting, there's no comment from citizens. You guys know you can always email us, pull us aside in Publix, or Native Sun if you're shopping locally. And we do, this is the government that's closest to you. Legislative session started yesterday. And we always continue to fight to keep the authority and the government as close to you all as possible. So we appreciate your support in helping us do that. And You have one more comment during my wrap up?
I'm just asking as far as, are you having another meeting?
We don't, that's, again, that will be discussed on the 20th, as far as how we want to
I think
proceed.
it's important.
There's not a meeting on the schedule at this moment, but that would be, that'll come out of that meeting.
And how are you presenting that? Was it put in Beach City
Presenting,
for the next meeting? Was this meeting in Beach City?
I would think so. It was on our Facebook page, on our website, was emailed out.
I'm finding what it was actually being.
There was no agenda.
No, there's no agenda. Even today, 4:30, there was no agenda. But it was a little bit confusing.
Well, there kind of really wasn't an agenda. So, yeah.
It was a community meeting, and it didn't say anything about what it was about.
Okay, I see. Yeah, okay, good feedback. Our communications manager is in the room, and I can tell that he's listening intently to the feedback on the communication. He's back there, Jacob, say hi. He's trying to hunch down further into his mask. I can feel it.
It's publicly noticed.
It was publicly noticed, but to be fair, we will make sure that we get it out through all of our channels very clearly, as far as future things go.
Please follow the City of Jacksonville Beach's Facebook page.
And if you do not already get our monthly emails, they are excellent, and this type of meeting is presented in those emails, so you can just give your email to Jacob, or just go onto our brand new, beautiful website and sign up for our emails there, and you'll get it just once a month. We're not spamming you. You'll get a once a month email update on developments in the city, updates on city meetings, and all sorts of good stuff. So Jacob does a very good job with our monthly email and trying to dig out of the hole.
You can also create an account on the city website, and you will get emailed proactively on the areas that you check off that you're interested in. So you don't have to keep going back, it will come to you in addition to a monthly newsletter.
Great. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.